But turning 40 here in a couple weeks, over the last year has been a lot of self-reflection, a
Hmm.
lot of self-evaluation of what my life looks like now, where I am now, what I want it to look like 50, 60, so forth, in a handful of areas. And I mean, those areas are my spiritual health, who I am as a husband, who I am as a father, what kind of legacy, if you will, I want to imprint on my children growing up.
Majority of men live in that term quiet desperation. Is because
Mhm.
one, they don't have the other men in the community, like you just mentioned, and they don't have anything that's like necessarily pushing them.
But it's become socially acceptable to live on pharmaceuticals and be incapable and let your body degrade over time. And drugs keep you alive, they keep you breathing, but there's no health span, there's no quality of life there.
This episode is sponsored by Black Label Meat. Black Label Meat only sells premium quality meat that is grass fed, grass finished, and they do regenerative grazing practices. Check them out now, blacklabelmeatcompany.com, and use the code Jesse for 10% off. Good old countdown. Derek, I appreciate you jumping on the podcast, even though we had a little miscommunication on what we were talking about today.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
But I appreciate you being flexible. So you are a business owner. You're
Yep,
a CrossFit athlete. You own a CrossFit gym.
retired athlete. I had to hang up the jersey there, give up the dreams. But yes, I own two CrossFit affiliates. My brother and I do. We've been in our current locations for 11 years. This is year 11. We've been coaching fitness for almost 16. He started with me right out of high school, and it just kind of evolved over the years into what is known as Double Edge Fitness now. And let's see. I mean, yeah, that's what I do all day. Run a business and I coach fitness and health. That's the
Nice.
backbone of my daily living right there.
And you are a husband and a father.
Yes, sir. Wife and I have been married 16 years, and I have two kids. Claire just turned 9, and Jackson is 6. So transitioning life into fatherhood, business owner, wannabe athlete, those things. Not to jump ahead, I don't know what we're going to get into exactly, but turning 40 here in a couple weeks, over the last year has been a lot of self-reflection, a
Hmm.
lot of self-evaluation of what my life looks like now, where I am now, what I want it to look like 50, 60, so forth, in a handful of areas. And I mean, those areas are my spiritual health, my who I am as a husband, who I am as a father, what kind of legacy, if you will, I want to imprint on my children growing up, and then my vision of where I am in my community with my business and my members and so forth. So I'm at it. I wouldn't say midlife crisis by any means. I think I had that when I was around age 38. But yeah, we're at an inflection of me evaluating what the next chapter looks like. I have on my wall over here. See it? It's your my life in weeks.
Yeah, I seen
Yeah,
Peter Attia talk about that.
yeah. So I get to update it here pretty soon, and it's just an interesting way that I've been thinking about all those aspects. And you think about stuff different. At least I
Well,
am.
yeah, let's dive into that because I mean, I'm not too far behind you. I'm about to turn 38. Me and
Okay.
my wife been together for almost 14 years.
Wow.
Um, so we're
So
just 2
were
years
you?
behind you guys.
Yeah. Were you part of the camp where everybody said you were too young to get married?
Um, Not really, only because everybody who knew me from my parents, what they knew that I didn't care what anyone thought.
Yeah.
I was lucky that I always had that since I was young.
Hmm.
People just knew that I was a rebel. They knew that I was going to just do what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So So yeah, I never had any of that because people knew, at least in my family, extended family, if they told me, I would tell them, "Does it look like I give a fuck about your opinion?" I was just that guy. So
Yeah.
no, but on the other hand, my same family, I have a cousin who's 22,
Okay.
D1 baseball player. He just got married in August, and everybody was like, he's too young. And it's just like, I'm like, fucking do it, dude. Get married.
Yeah. No, I heard it a lot when we were getting
Hmm.
married at a
Yeah.
young age. And just, I don't know. Like, I just knew. Like, I remember the moment I saw my wife on campus at UNR, and I didn't know who she was. But for whatever reason, I just knew that I was going to spend the rest of my life with that person. I don't know if that sounds creepy or what, but
No, that's
I don't know. Yeah, it's funny because the events that took place to us actually like meeting each other and stuff. It's a little bit
mhm.
funny. And I remember the first time I crossed paths with her on campus. It's crazy.
That is
And,
cool.
and many people were like, "Oh, you're too young," this and that, and like here we are, going on 17 years.
Yeah. So were you guys because you mentioned you're spiritual, you use the word spiritual. So are
Hmm.
you believe in God? You a man of
I'm a
faith
Christian.
or
I'm a
Christian?
Christian.
Okay.
Yeah,
Me too. I'm full blown.
yeah,
Freaking
yeah. So I'm not shy about my faith. I'm a
same.
Christian, and that's how I raised. That's how my wife, how we raise our children, and yeah, I
So
mean,
was she a Christian when you met her? Or were you
she
both
was.
Christians?
I mean, she was baptized. Kind of the standards. I mean, she grew up in Montana, so pretty conservative family, if you will.
Hmm.
But I will say, I mean, I grew up in a very strong Christian household. But I mean, like any idiot in college and stuff, you get away from it.
Hmm.
And I'm guilty of that. I am. But I'll say my wife and I's faith grew together a lot through our marriage together. Like it wasn't, she was a different religion or not religious at all. She was, but she didn't grow up, per se going to church in various activities like my family. I mean, we did Bible camps, we did church, and like it was just a very ritualistic um, relationship growing up. It was just part of my life. So I'm not going to pretend I didn't get away from my faith in college and was like the perfect human being by any means.
Hmm.
And then when my wife and I met, and we just continued to grow, and we still continue to grow together in our faith.
Statistically, younger couples who are of faith have the highest success rate when it comes to marriage. So it's one of the reasons why I ask, like, if you guys were
Yeah,
both of faith, and I get being I was that college kid who said I believed in Jesus, but my walk looked nothing like someone who believed in Jesus.
yeah. I mean, there's just various aspects of my younger college years that I'm not exactly proud of, but I don't hate myself for it by any
Hmm.
means. And it was a growing period that, you know, it is what it is. And I know for sure, I mean, I've grown past that chapter of my life.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to dive into what you were talking about earlier of how you're looking at what you want your next 5 years to be, your relationship with God, what it looks like being a husband and a father. How do you go through that process? What changes do you want in the next 5 years from the last 5 or 10? Building a business, starting a family, etc. Um, yeah, I guess what does that
Yeah.
look like?
I mean, kind of maybe walk backwards a little bit. As an adult, maybe 6, 7 years ago now, I chose to get baptized again.
Hmm.
Now we're at church, and I just felt a calling to reestablish my Christian faith and my acceptance of Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior as an adult. Right? I was baptized as a child. And then I just felt like it was an inflection point of my own adulthood, if you will, that I chose to get baptized then. And then grinding through the 30s, business life, mean, the majority of my big stressors up until my daughter's medical issue she had were driven by business, right? So we get into COVID. If you feel like there was absolutely terrible part of my life, and it's really easy as a Christian to fall back on your faith and ask for God's help when things are going bad. Right? I'm very guilty of that. Things aren't going right. You're stressed, and those tend to be the inflection points for me over the years, getting to now, of where I fall back on my faith more. I pick up the Bible a little bit more. The the desire to go back to church, be more active in church. And I will say daily, I don't know, it's a habit. I do pray daily. It's a part of my morning routine. But what's happened since, I guess, the last couple years, I've been feeling this need to grow as a spiritual leader in my household.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I feel like I'm a leader in the nutrition and fitness and doing the right thing and, specific moral values, but I feel a weakness in myself of being a spiritual leader in my household for both my wife and my children. And granted, skip forward, get into Claire's medical condition that put us in the hospital for a while, and that nightmare. It was easy to fall back on faith, pray, and be really active. But right now, everything's going good. And I feel like I'm at one of those inflection points of where this is my opportunity to step forward in my faith from a place of gratitude versus a place of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, snapshot journey of my faith and where it was and what I'm looking at now, what I want my children growing up and knowing their dad, not only as he's the fit father, he's the dad that's super handy. Like I can fix almost anything. I do the fishing, the hunting, all this stuff, but I
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that they know me as a man of God, as somebody who not just does good deeds, but I actually invest energy into the word of Christ, and I build a relationship with my kids and my wife through that. And that is what I'm praying on a lot, and it's uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable for me to think about being that person in my family that I need to be. And it's going to be a new journey for me. And that is what I'm thinking on in my spiritual journey, my Christian walk with Christ, going forward from this point. That's been heavy on my heart now for the last like 4 or 5 months.
So what do you feel that is uncomfortable about it? One, but two, I mean, I love that you want to do this because I'm a firm believer in that men or husbands, we set the tone for literally everything in the household.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the leadership aspect of being head of the household, whether it's even just simply our energy in the home is going to dictate
Mm-hmm.
the energy of everybody else. I guess what part is uncomfortable, and then on the other hand, I mean, I love that you're willing to take that step back and look and say this is something that I want to improve on.
Yeah, I think the uncomfortable part for me is, oftentimes when you think of spiritual leader, you think of, biblical intellect. No, I don't have the Bible memorized
Mm-hmm.
by any means. I I don't consider myself at this juncture of my walk with Christ to be any sort of biblical intellect. And I think is just when you read through the Bible, it's complex. And being able to articulate and digest and educate, not saying I'm trying to become a pastor, but to have meaningful conversations and being a person that can explain to my kids, so forth, as we go through scripture and whatnot. And I guess because of my type A control issue, ego driven personality, not having that knowledge, I'm scared to step out into the unknown, and I guess willingness the willingness to admit my weakness in it in order to grow into it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So,
Yeah.
like, to put a fitness perspective on it, I know a lot about the gym world, training, nutrition, all that stuff. I'm very comfortable. Like, I can have that conversation I'm comfortable with medical doctors, the whole gamut, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to my spiritual knowledge, arguably it's ego driven because I don't feel adequate enough to have the conversations in depth, um, that I'm scared of it.
No, makes sense.
So I mean, it's a ego driven fear that I know I need to let go of and just accept the learning process, but also embrace it, because your biggest growth comes from getting uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so taking, I guess, philosophies that I live by in the gym, telling somebody brand new to CrossFit and hasn't worked out in 15 years, we start here and we're going to grow together.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess a lot of my historical interactions with various pastors and male leaders when it comes to Christianity, I don't know, it's always been hard for me to relate to them. And it's always felt like it's a talk down to versus a talk with.
Mm.
And
Okay.
I think historically that's driven some of my fear. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, not a therapist or whatever, but I've never had a relationship that I respected with many male figures in my life when it comes to a relationship with God. So I feel like I'm establishing that on my own.
Yeah, that's interesting. The part of not having that like respect or connection with the pastors, because I've always felt that, but mine, I guess, is different. Not necessarily to talk down, but and this is just my own side thing. I've just come across too many pastors who I didn't have respect for as a man. The way they carry themselves, the way they
100%.
just seemed just, I mean, I made a couple of videos on overweight pastors, like fat pastors. It's
Oh,
like,
bro, don't get me started.
and
The
I'm just
Christian
like,
male today, the physically incapable, self
dude,
identifying Christian male today it hurts my heart. And that is a
mhm.
topic I am happy to, I have some of the exact same sentiments.
Yeah. And it's just like, I just feel that they were not a representation of what a man should be, let
Agreed.
alone a man who's speaking in front of a congregation of people. And like they
Yep.
are in a leadership role,
Yep.
but you can tell that they indulge, have no self control, but
Mm-hmm.
then are up there preaching to us about our sins and how we need to have control over ours. But it's like, bro, you're 300 pounds and you're not 6'9" playing a professional sport.
Yeah. 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 I, this past weekend, I literally talked to my wife about that same frustration I have looking at quote unquote society's, Christian men. And arguably, it's not the men that I want to surround myself with.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to spiritual knowledge and spiritual health, yeah, there are definitely great, very intellectual people. But when it comes to certain aspects for me of the men I want to surround myself with, there's very few, I guess, that fit the mold.
Yeah. Me and my wife call it finding our people
Mm-hmm.
because we're just
And I will
always,
say,
we're always searching to find
Yeah.
our people because there's so few far between.
Yeah. And I will say, as I get older, my circle gets smaller.
Yeah.
You know, it just, you don't have time for BS. You don't have energy for it. But my desire to lead and be a light, especially for, my son, the younger generation, my goal is to lead a life that somebody would ask me, hey, what do you do? Why do you do it? You seem like you have a really awesome life. What's that like? And I share, from my beliefs, my training, health, fitness, my hobbies, and through that inspires other people, at least in my mind, to maybe want to participate and be a part of that stuff. I mean, the amount of men that I know that can't change a tire, as basic as that. It's like,
Yeah.
it's a little bit shocking. But it is a state of society over the last 20 years. Things have changed. People might laugh at me that I just learned what artificial intelligence is the other day and how to use it to proofread an email. Like, so I don't know. I don't know, man. I share some of your same sentiments, though.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, especially as Christians. And when you look at the church, it feels very feminine. It's made to cater towards the women, just the way decor is, the way that everything is presented. And then us men are just, when we go, and I'm sure 90% of men don't look at that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Um, they don't know any different. But when I look at it, it just makes me think that there are no warriors in this building, none.
Dude, when I
Um,
look at society
well, yeah,
in general, but yeah, to your point,
I
at
mean,
church,
and
it's like if something's gonna go down right now, who's looking at the crowd? Who's gonna be the ones to get their hands dirty?
yeah, and when you look at, I guess, society, yes, but inside of a church of Christians, when we're persecuted throughout the entire world, the
Hmm.
entire world,
Hmm.
there's no warriors in there when I step in.
Yep.
I mean, I knew there was one guy who he was a deacon and then became a pastor from Reno, moved away, who I respect as a man. But he don't live here no more. He moved to another state. And it's like I look around and I've been going to a number of different churches trying to find churches. Pastors, they're nice.
Hmm.
Don't get, they are nice, but it's like I'm bummed because I feel like they're not a representation of what a man is. They're not the warrior in a garden.
Hmm. Yep. I mean, to that topic, I don't know if you've heard of him, but like John Lovell, the warrior
Yeah.
poet guy.
Yeah.
So
I
like,
listened to a couple podcasts with him on it. I love that guy.
yeah. So a lot of his, I guess, content that he creates, I really enjoy.
Hmm.
And the concept of being a loving warrior, a caring warrior. And
Hmm.
like what you just said, too many people are just too nice. Like, you're just nice, passive. That's a nice guy. But you don't feel that, I don't know, that X factor, the dangerous side of that person. It's like, and then when you have dangerous situations, there's not much left in society to stand up to it.
Yes.
And I mean, to get all into all the problems with a lot of handful of problems with the youth and men today, I feel a lot of men are very void of having a battle to fight. And I'm not talking about going to war and getting in fights in the streets and stuff. I feel like in our modern day society that we live in now, the technological age, it's just like there's no physical battle to fight. And for me, in many ways, that battle for me is fought in the gym.
Hmm.
You know, representation for me, I mean, and this part of spiritual health is the physical boundaries I can push my body to, what I'm capable of. I mean, it starts back in wrestling days. And my dad was in the military. My grandfather was a cop. I grew up in a very physical, self-defense oriented family. And you just don't see that. You don't see that happening now at all. No.
You don't. And I saw a really good clip talking about how we don't do anything that's dangerous. We don't do anything
Isn't
that
that Jordan
actually like.
Peterson?
No, this was a rock climber. He was
Oh,
talking
Alex
about.
Honnold. I saw that
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
I saw that clip pop through the interwebs the other day.
Yeah, and it's like we don't do anything that really puts us in a state of fear.
Yep.
So therefore, when we don't do those things, we get all sorts of anxiety just because we think we're going to be 5 minutes late to the airport.
Yep.
Like we just have the smallest amount of anxiety having an interaction with another human.
Mm-hmm.
Versus if we actually did things that were dangerous and that really had us overcome with fear. And now someone might say like, well, I'm not going to go climb a fucking rock face with
Yeah. No
no
gear.
gear like he does. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
like go by yourself for like just 3 days hiking in the mountains, stay the night on a new moon. So it means it's fucking dark, you
Mm-hmm.
know? There's where we live, we have bears, we have cats, mountain lions for people
Mm-hmm.
that are
Yeah.
thinking house cats. Um, you know, go. I'm obsessed with archery hunting, and I tell you, there have been times where I'm hiking out an animal at freaking 1 a.m, 11 miles, and I'm like, there's a fucking cat just watching me. And
Yeah.
you just have to overcome some of those psychological
Mm-hmm.
things, or the lifting, or when I was in school, I would get I got into fights like in high school. And trust me, when you get in one where you have to go and meet someone, your fucking nerves, oh my gosh, are going. But people don't do that. I've talked to people who are in high school and are like 10 years younger than me. And I'm like, hey man, did you ever see fights when I went to that school? We were always getting in fights. And they're like, no, you could get hurt. No one fights. And it's like, well,
I
really?
got suspended for a week for fighting in high school.
Yeah, dude,
Not
I remember.
condoning fighting, but I mean, sometimes I'm still in the camp. Sometimes the bully needs to be popped in the face.
Yeah. And
And it
I
self
remember,
reconciles things, and it just, yeah.
yeah, just like so many different things like that. Or like I took a Bible study group to go box at a boxing gym, and half the guys didn't do it. They were like, no, no way. And then a couple guys they did. But it's just like doing something like that, getting into a ring, even if it's just a boxing ring with gloves on, you're gonna be fucking nervous because that
Yeah.
other dude, especially if you don't know him,
Mm-hmm.
because we had one guy box a guy he didn't know, and then
Yeah.
me and my buddy we boxed. But it's the whole point of just like literally getting out of that comfort zone into
Yep.
something where it could possibly be dangerous. Not getting
Mm-hmm.
out of your comfort zone, you're going to go public speak, but getting out of your comfort zone to where it's like something bad could happen, like
Yeah.
physically to us. Most likely it's not gonna. I'm not
No.
telling anyone to like
Chances are
make
you're
sure
going
you
to
break your
heal.
leg. Yeah,
Yeah. No.
exactly.
I mean, Jordan Peterson said, kids these days, you need to let them do dangerous things carefully.
Yeah, I like to use the term "do dangerous things focused" because we just in
Yeah.
my household we don't say the word careful. I just don't
Okay.
want psychologically them to think to always be careful, but now psychologically always be focused on what you're doing.
Yeah.
All about it. But yes,
Yeah.
I love that saying. Um, and it's a thing that us fathers have to do to we really pull our children away from their mother slowly as they get older
Mm-hmm.
and push them into doing those dangerous things while they're being focused or careful.
Yeah.
But if
I mean,
if us fathers aren't doing anything dangerous or didn't grow up doing anything dangerous because we're stuck to an iPad or a phone, or then we're not going to encourage young kids, especially boys, and it has an impact on the development of the frontal cortex to do those things. or
Yep.
just not.
What's interesting too, just about men our age. So I just did like a summer camp deal in Colorado, and my catalyst for doing it was I got continuing education credits. But it's basically 36 hours nonstop physical beatdown. You're awake 36 hours. It's the single, to this point in my life, the most physically demanding thing I've ever done. And me and one other guy there, the drive to sign up was for continuing education credits. And the rest of the men there were there, to your point, to do something that got them uncomfortable, to do something that got them out of the desk, to do something, that they felt missing in their life.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few, I would say probably over half the crowd at this event were terrified going into it. But then when we all came out of it, the personal growth, even amongst myself, and I've done a lot of physical things before, but pushing the body to a very unhealthy level like we did that
Mm-hmm.
weekend, there is so much growth in that. And it was cool to see, men of different walks of life, men who, they ride a desk as a job, maybe didn't have the father figures to introduce them to things, anywhere remotely close to that nature growing up, stepping out and seeking out opportunities like that on their own to start, maybe being that person for their spouse or their kids or whatnot. It was cool. So I think there's hope. I think
That is
there's hope.
cool. Yeah, and then you got what is that guy? Bedros something.
Yeah,
He has
I
like
like
some
him.
sort of camp thing that he does. He has a couple different
The
ones.
Squire camp.
Yeah,
He
and then he has that one with the kids and their
mm-hmm.
dads.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like
I
guys
think
are
that's cool
trying to
stuff.
do things like
Yeah.
that.
I think it's cool stuff. I also think some of that industry part of the world is like getting a little bit convoluted in ways, but there's nothing available. There's no tests out there for people to go do. There's no, a lot of dads aren't going to take their kids hunting for 3-4 days in the mountains where you're living on MREs and potentially getting lost, and
Mm-hmm.
like, to your point, packing out an animal with potential bears and mountain lions around, and there's that side of it. There's taking a stance in an altercation.
Yeah.
I've witnessed my grandfather and my father take stances in altercations, and you know that left an impression on me. Just you don't, yeah, don't know where I'm going with that, but I think there is a craving amongst men to have something, a battle to fight, to do, test their bodies, test their mental fortitude, and to grow. And I think there's also a craving for men to be surrounded by other men to help facilitate that. But I also can see the business out there taking advantage of it in a way.
Yeah, I could see that. So do you think that the reason I believe majority of men live in that term quiet desperation is because
Mm-hmm.
one, they don't have the other men in the community, like you just mentioned, and they don't have anything that's like necessarily pushing them. If you're a business owner, you have that business and feeding your family to push you. If
Mm-hmm.
you're an employee somewhere, which majority of people are, there's not necessarily something to push you. And then if you don't have a community of men who, I believe masculinity is forged amongst other men, it's not
Mm-hmm.
something that you're born with. So if you aren't with other masculine men who are forging, it's that iron sharpening iron. You're not setting like purpose and goals. It's why a large percentage of men are living a life of quiet desperation.
Yeah. Um, I also think it's really hard for men to be vulnerable with their spouse. and having a network of men that you can open up to and be vulnerable with for personal growth and development.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, like that group of men, it has to be a group that has earned equal respect. And I think until you achieve that group of people that you have that earned equal respect, can you start growing and sharpening iron together,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And I mean, I'm not going to, this might sound egotistical, but I've outgrown a lot of men in my life. Like there are friends from 10 years ago that I have zero desire to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say a lot of my personal growth, let me say, as a man, if you will, one, wanting to be a husband, father, and that role model, and, no longer want to be drinking buddies. But it comes down to what I do in the gym. Like people that train with me and work out with me in the gym and our culture here, they're constantly fighting forward for excellence. They're showing up and doing hard things. They are overcoming, training through around, injuries at times, but you're subjecting yourself to pain and discomfort to better your life.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my closest friends these days have all come from training together. And that evolves into other things outside the gym, hanging out, doing other things. And it just, I don't know, self perpetuated from that for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's why the gym is my battleground in many ways. That's where I test myself. That's where I push myself. That's where I measure myself against not other people, but myself. And I try to take those principles and apply them to other areas of my life. And I feel fortunate to have that.
Can you go into your meaning of being vulnerable with your wife? Uh, I want to hear, I guess, what that means to you, because I don't like the term vulnerable. I like the term
Mm-hmm.
like being humble, which I'm sure our definition would probably be the same.
Yeah.
Only because the word vulnerable, the actual definition means a weakness. So if there's a wall surrounding a castle where it's vulnerable, in that wall is the most weak, or a
Yeah.
newborn baby calf is vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we throw out this word in society right now amongst men and men being vulnerable, but it's like, to me, a better word is humble, because men walk around with so much pride. We'd rather they be humble and admit their faults.
Yeah. I look at both those independently, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't thought about them in this context, but when I think of vulnerability, I think every human being on the face of this earth, we're not Jesus Christ, right? We have weaknesses. We
Yeah,
have,
yeah,
you know, breaking points, if you will. We have issues. We aren't perfect by any means. And when I talk about, like, I'm not going to go home, and I mean, I'm very transparent with my wife, but the stressors of the day,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
work, business, um, fell apart in a workout, whatever it might be, things that I'm struggling with. Although I will say I do have a very communicative relationship with my wife, I'm not going to get into the details of something I'd get into with maybe my best friend
Mm-hmm.
in the gym. Um, I think as a man, I try to protect my family and not share those stresses with them so they're not worried about it. Like if I'm struggling with something financially at work, trying to overcome, I mean, a lot of this, bringing it back to COVID, there were things that I was trying to figure out financially that I kept close to myself. And I didn't want to bring that stress home to my wife. I didn't want to bring that stress home to my kids. I wanted their day to be normal.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a few friends who I'm very close with that I was able to talk with and ultimately be resources. And, you know, it helped a lot to be able to offload some of that. I mean, also during COVID, I decided to start getting therapy. I started going to therapy, uh, getting psychological help. And that was one of the best things I ever did. And I have a mentor here at the gym, He fought in Afghanistan, general, done all the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like a man's man. Also, devout Christian. And when I think of somebody that I want to emulate, he's the first person that comes into my mind. And he is one of the few people that I've gotten very vulnerable with, in the sense of talking about I've cried with him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I have absolute respect for him
Yeah.
in all aspects of his life. Husband, father, warrior, just like he exudes in my mind what masculinity is,
Mm-hmm.
and is a role model that I can very much be vulnerable about where I'm feeling weak. And then, in a few instances, he helped me navigate that. And there are very few people that I get that way with. And I think it is important for me to have those conversations with somebody like him, because from a man's point of view, I don't think my wife could have answered those questions.
See, I
That's
love
my process of it.
No, I actually think your process is perfect and ideal, and something that I would suggest to any man who comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm going through all this. I want to tell my wife." And it's like, I would avoid telling your wife everything, not because we're not being honest, but
Mm-hmm.
because we don't want to put our wife into a spot of fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a man, just like you're saying, if you have a group of men, two or three, or someone you look up to who you can unload that onto, because he will understand, and there's that brotherhood, he's there for you and can help you navigate it. That's the thing that I feel that men need. And
Yep.
they can't just go vomit their problems on their wives. It's going to just elevate their cortisol levels. The fight or flight's going to kick in. If she knows you guys are consistently struggling financially, even if she's not physically aware of it because your lights are still on, you still have
Yeah.
fucking food. She's
Mm-hmm.
going to figure out how to take over the situation and want to take control. And and she's not doing that because she doesn't trust you. She's doing that out of a survival, an instinct.
Mm-hmm. And I
Um,
think that instinct also gets stronger when you become a mother. Right?
yeah.
Mama bear
Yeah.
syndrome is a real thing.
Yes.
And when it becomes, is anything with the kids at stake here, and then mama bear comes out, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
real thing. And when it comes to husband wife relationship, my wife is the backbone of who I am as a man, and I'm
Yeah.
not afraid to admit that. But we very much have our, what do you want to say, our identity and our roles, and they complement each other.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be where I am right now in life, in all aspects of my life, without the support of my wife believing in me, and her telling me that she believes in me, her telling me that she trusts me. And that trust and that belief is also why I put a lot of pressure on myself to succeed and grow and continue to evolve. And I would say, circling back around, that's probably one of the big drivers of me wanting to dive deeper in being a better spiritual leader, you know,
Mm-hmm.
being that person for my family, because my wife does trust me, does believe in me. And I feel like that's a growth area for my family that I want to be there for, just as I have been for other aspects of our life. So, but yeah, there are obstacles and hurdles in my life that I would not have gotten through without having a brotherhood of men that I respect and look up to, and am okay with being vulnerable, sharing my weaknesses and what is breaking me inside, knowing that they are going to lean in and support me, and also call me on my shit,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, saying, hey, you need to just toughen the fuck up,
Mm-hmm.
figure it out, and toughen the fuck up. And I've had brothers have that conversation with me, and it's like, yep, yep, And then
Yeah,
you
man.
overcome that obstacle
Yeah.
and you're stronger, more resilient, better for it for the next time.
Yeah. And because it's podcast setting, we can kind of give context. Again, it's not saying don't be open and honest with your wife. That there
No,
may
not
be
at
some
all.
cards, you're not putting out on the table for the cohesive benefit of the family, and you need to
Mhm.
express those to the trusted men in your life.
Yeah, I mean, what good would it have done? I'm sitting here the night our mayor shuts down the city. I'm gonna give a context to a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my brother, we come to the gym. We're told you're not doing business. At that time, where they say 4 weeks turned into 8 weeks and so forth. I mean, my brother and I's entire financial future is wrapped up in these businesses. It's how we both support our families, and we are why they both have great jobs. At the end of the day, we live a life that we could survive off my wife's income if we had to. But our quality of life as we know it, it looked like it was being ripped out of my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting here at the gym, and I remember it clear as day. And my brother and I are going through all of our stuff. What can we shut down? What can we cancel? And basically shutting down our business. I'm leaving a voicemail recording of like we aren't open, and it was gut wrenching. I don't know what good it would have done if I went home that night and started bawling my brains out about losing this materialistic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my good friend, I met with him a few days later, and this sphere of influence. I don't know if we can see it, but he actually drew this for me, so I leave this up here all the time. I did not put this up for the podcast; it's legitimately up there all the time. And he's like, "You need to identify right now what can you control, what do you have influence over, and what is interests, what don't you have control over that is influencing you." And he sat down with me. What do I have control over? All right, what can I do within the business to make the business work? No, we decided to rent out equipment and keep your membership active. You can take chunks of equipment home working out. We can program workouts online. We can do virtual stuff. These are things I have control over,
Mm-hmm.
that I can execute on. What I have influence over, I have influence over how I'm reacting to the situation. If I'm
Yep.
falling apart crying, emotional, just not keeping control of myself, that's going to influence everybody around me. So get control of yourself.
Yep.
And then what are the things you don't have? You don't have control over what the government just said you can and can't do. Now, that's out of your control. You need to function within what's happening right now. So you need to let it go. And I don't think that same conversation would have happened if I went home and just fell apart crying, scared out of my mind with my wife. She would have said, everything's going to be all right and this and that. And to your point, it would have caused more stress in the household, which ultimately, in my mind, would have caused more stress for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of where I leaned into a brother, and, he very much gave me a framework to get my brain sorted out and to take control of what I actually have control over. And I would say that's probably the most prominent recent example in that scenario. We could jump to my daughter's medical condition, and that zapped my control issues in many ways, to where I had to lean into my wife as support in many ways. And that could be another example of leaning into your spouse, trust, opening up, and being vulnerable. If we want to get into that, there's a lot.
I mean, we can go as far deep into it as you want. But so with the COVID situation, you had two
Mm-hmm.
children at home
Mm-hmm.
with the wife.
Yep.
And I don't know your wife at all, but most wives would have been in fear of what's going to happen to their nest and their home.
Mm-hmm. So
And
my
just
wife was
think of
between
the
jobs
worst.
too.
Oh, so that's just a cherry on top, just making it even better of the stress that could have
Yeah,
gone on if
going,
you would have.
going. Yeah. So to just give a perception of that, so we had decided for her to take a little time off work. My son was, I think, 15, almost 2. I think it's all blur, but he's young. Right? He wasn't in daycare. He wasn't in school, and my wife was between jobs, and she does internal medicine, and she just quit in one place. She was miserable working where she was working. I was like, just quit, take some time off, evaluate what you want to do for work, being a mom, and so forth. So our plan was for her to take like a 3-4 month kind of sabbatical and kind of let a job come to her.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the plan going in. And then COVID hit, and her being in medical, obviously the need for jobs opened up in a big way. So she ended up getting hired at Renown during all that. But there was so much uncertainty for probably 4 weeks of we don't know what the hell's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like we just don't know. And I mean, I'm very fortunate enough to have a community of people that literally stood behind me and was like, we got this. But at the end of the day, I'm bleeding money like a hemorrhaging artery,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure by we got this. I don't know what that means. And then on the home front, my wife between jobs, kids, and Claire was getting ready to start school. We decided that she was going to be old for kindergarten, not young. So we kept her back a year. We didn't start her that year. With all that going on, it was just so much. It was so much turmoil, uh, and it was a test of my faith. And like I said earlier, that was one of those moments where I was drawn in, seeking God's guidance and help from a place of fear versus, right now things are pretty good in a place of gratitude. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, it was a lot. I think
Oh,
those years helped me grow a lot. Potentially took some years off my life. I'm not sure. I'm trying to get those back now.
yeah.
But
The yeah, that was an interesting time, COVID. Not I
mm,
didn't go through anything that you went through, but just the internal I had a little bit of an internal struggle with my wife because I'm
mm,
saying this is all bullshit. We're not fucking wearing a mask. We're going everywhere just like normal. And she comes from a family who was like, they were pledging to COVID. You want me to wear
yeah,
5 masks? I'll wear 5 masks. You want me to lock ourselves? And so she was like, but what if they're right? Not her family, just media.
yeah,
And it's like, I don't care.
yeah,
I do not care. And it's like, why is this lady fucking questioning me? I'm supposed to be the fucking head of the household, you know? And so, like, we were having these internal struggles, and I'm just trying to literally live my life exactly how I was living it, not changing a thing.
yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of growth. To your point, like I share your sentiment on a lot of that. Like, what is this mass bullshit? All this stuff, like. My head was about to explode, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's because you have a business. You're scared of this." I was like, "Yeah," but also kind of looking at everything, I'm calling bullshit early on. But then my wife being in medicine and I guess front lines, like there was definitely an issue. Lots of patients that she knew died of COVID. There was so getting the medical perspective from her and what's happening, treating patients and dealing with it medically, and then me over here, like I'm not getting the damn vaccine. They can take that and shove it.
same, same.
And then about 6, 8, a good about 3 months into it, like the stars started to align on calling bullshit on a lot of things. And I
Yeah.
think it's pretty common knowledge now that that was a huge manipulation of society, fear driven. But in the beginning, the first 2 weeks of that shutdown, I was like, okay, if this is actually a thing, then with my business being something where humans are getting together, I want to make sure that I am not the cause of mass spread and catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for the first 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I was pretty open minded to the fact that the business I ran could potentially lead to spread, you know, people taking COVID home, killing grandma. I was mindful of that.
Mm-hmm.
Getting what my wife was seeing in being in, medicine and so forth. But it was about 8 weeks in, I just said, hell with it. We're opening back up. And I didn't get COVID for almost 2.5 years before it finally got me. And I've only had it once. Everybody says I'm the super carrier because I never get the symptoms, but um, yeah, there was a lot of interesting dialogue in my house with my boneheadedness in many ways. And funny, come full circle, I am more cautious of infectious disease. My daughter's on an immune modulator now.
Mm-hmm.
My what I would get resentful for or judgmental for when somebody would be wearing a mask, 2 years ago, I still think it's stupid when I see people driving in a car by themselves with a mask on. I will say that's stupid till the day I die. But I'm a lot more tolerant and accepting of people with an autoimmune disease or are on immune modulating drugs. And my daughter, she's one of those now.
Mm-hmm.
We do have to be mindful. Now, do we walk around in fear? Does she wear a mask? Hell no. But I am more respectful of other people's beliefs around infectious disease and understanding and potentially their risks
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. So, I mean, I'll say there's a lot of personal growth for me in looking at two sides of an equation versus, as I was very much in your camp. And in many aspects, I still am, but I am definitely, I don't want to, mature is not the right word, but I see different perspectives in
Mm-hmm.
different situations that I very much have respect for now that I didn't necessarily have for that first year and a half, 2 years. For instance, I had some family members have COVID and they were coming to town. I was like, I'm sorry, guys, I can't have you over. I'm not willing to expose my daughter who's on an immune modulating drug now. Because if she gets sick, it's not going to do her in, but it's going to hit her a hell of a lot worse than it's going to hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't want to subject her to that. So, I mean, I guess I've grown up in many ways, but I still have my convictions on certain
Yeah.
aspects of all that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. My aunt, she's a doctor at Renown.
Okay.
And so I would hear her perception on it, and she said a handful of other surgeons all fake their COVID cards because they're owned by a national company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Renown sold
Yeah.
however many years ago. They're owned nationally, so they all had to fill out those COVID cards for their shots.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that one of the other surgeons knew someone who could get a bunch of them. And so they just had a half dozen of them and they all just are forging them and faking them and did
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And because they were like, we're not getting that. And these are a small handful. I don't know if it was six, but she said a handful of her peers, they all faked it because they weren't getting it.
Yep.
They're like, no. They said, we'll
I
lose
know
our
a
jobs.
lot of people that did that.
Yeah. And, people like to say, well, all the doctors were doing it. It's like, not these ones, not these, however many. And that's only on her level. Renown's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't have been the only half dozen surgeons at Renown who
Oh,
did
no,
it.
dude. The network of people that I know, I mean, yeah, that was a fuck situation, forcing people to get a vaccine that was rushed to market.
Yeah,
I'm
otherwise they would
still
lose their
angry.
livelihood. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, my dad's in the Marine Corps, and he held his ground.
Good. That's
That
awesome.
he's like, I'm not taking experimental stuff like
Mm-hmm.
this, especially when it started to get where it's affecting comorbidities. I get where COVID was hitting home. Like it was hitting people with comorbidities, unhealthy, respiratory issues, and so forth.
And
But I
not
was
people
like,
who only had one comorbidity.
yeah,
90s, what is it, 8% of them all had three or four, three or more, sorry, three or
yeah,
more.
yeah. So when I started realizing like healthy people and this isn't affecting kids, it's like you need to do what's best for you, but you need to leave me the fuck alone
Mm-hmm.
and stop telling me this and that and whatever else. Because obviously, a great way to strike fear in society is a pandemic will do that. And yeah, I don't really want to get too political, but I have my feelings. So
Oh,
and thoughts.
I was blown away that the mayor, because me and you are in the same city, I
Yeah.
was blown away that our mayor got reelected after claiming that she wanted to continue to keep the city locked down further than when the governor opened the state.
Mhm.
I'm like, how does the math add up that you're getting reelected?
Yeah.
I was trying to vote out anyone, Democrat, Republican, anyone who was in favor of any of the COVID stuff. I'm like,
Yeah. Any sort of lockdown. Yep. All of them gone.
let's get that person out, that person out. I don't care if they're blue or red.
Yep. I agree. Something I'm passionate about. Next 10 years of my life, right? Turning
Yeah.
40. You got 40 coming up on you. I'm really thinking through like what does my health, wellness, fitness, capabilities as a man, if you will, just as a human being. And right now, at this juncture of my life, I am the healthiest, fittest, mentally healthiest that I've ever been in my life. And I say that because what I'm doing in my 30s, what I'm doing in my 40s is going to facilitate such a long term benefit
Mm-hmm.
in my overall life, but being a father, husband, but grandfather. You know, I just really have this vision for myself of being an awesome grandfather. That doesn't mean I'm not trying to be an awesome father. I just want to be able to be that person for my next generation after
Mm-hmm.
me. And the importance of your physical health, your mental health, what you eat. I mean, that's where me and you connected was on
Mm-hmm.
food and how you treat your body, how you treat your brain, your circle of influence. I have taken so much more control of that looking at my 40th birthday into what I envision the next 10 years of my life to be like to influence the next 10 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think society takes that serious enough. That what you do each and every day, you get away with some shit in your 20s when it comes to your health. But when you hit your 30s, it starts mattering a little bit more. But when it hits your 40s, it's like your last decade to really get control and prevent uh, long term metabolic disease.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, big part of me personally as a man, husband, father, coach, business leader is to really put a lot of effort and energy into helping people move forward aggressively with their health and fitness because it fires me up. It excites me. And to give somebody and be able to share the knowledge and guide them in that journey that I'm doing with myself, but to be able to take as many people with it as humanly possible. And yeah, that's what I'm fired up about the next chapter of my life going forward. And I feel like God keeps me in this position because COVID, a few other things that happened in my life. Like I keep coming back to being a coach and in the gym life, and I feel like this is where He wants me,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel it heavy on my heart, and I'm excited to go forward into all these aspects of me, Derek Wellock, and helping and serving my community and helping people in the realms I feel God has given me, that gift, if you will, and that drive. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and all the health and fitness, whether it's mental, physical, all that compounds, and people don't
Oh, yeah.
realize. You mentioned like you can get away with things in your 20s, but it compounds for the negative or for the better. And we have that choice, and it's something that I harp on dads about because it's you're a direct representation of like what your son can expect in the future
Mm-hmm.
because we program our children. Son, daughter's going to be looking for a man like you.
Mm-hmm.
Your son is going to try to emulate you. And there's a lot of how we carry ourselves for our wives. And
Mm-hmm.
when men don't take their health and fitness seriously, it kind of irks me because I mean, I think me and you have talked about how Peter Attia and their clinic, they did a couple studies on the number one predictor against all cause mortality, muscle mass.
Yep.
And
VO2
how
max and muscle mass.
and how he was like, wait, this can't be correct.
Yep.
Run it again. It was correct.
Yep.
Yes. Um, and being that it's 2024, we have all this information. We can just go on the internet, look. Yes, there's some weird things on the internet that there might be some controversy. But the point is, we can all make that step of working out. How many times a
Yep.
week do you work out? And you say you're
Usually,
probably the healthiest you've been, right?
I would say, I mean, I move every day,
Okay.
but my intentional training program is Monday through Saturday.
Okay. So you're working 6 days working
Yeah.
out?
My training budget is 90 minutes, 6 days a week.
Okay. So right now, I wouldn't say I'm in my absolute best shape because I'm not the strongest I've ever been. And I'll probably get that back over the next 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I would say I'm pretty much up there in the best I've ever been. And I'm almost 38.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm only lifting 3 days a week
Mm-hmm.
and I'm running 3 days a week and short, just on the treadmill in my garage.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that hard. And
No, it's really not. I mean, in the gym, doing this for as long as I have, people who work out consistently 3 days a week and do a
Mhm.
combination of strength training and anaerobic training, which in my mind, I mean, that is CrossFit. So people who follow our program, I can speak to our program and our results speak for itself, are consistent 3 days a week or more, continuously make progress. I mean, they might not be the leanest. I mean, there's a calorie equation there. 3 days, 3 1 hour workouts a week aren't going to overcome major caloric surplus. But when it comes to their fitness improvements, and the more they're in the gym, chances are the more they're going to be trying to eat healthy and so forth. But 3 days a week is kind of that tipping point. When I can get people consistently there, continued progress is going to be made. 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
And our members, I got quite a few, but one person pops in my head particularly. He's been consistent 3 to 5 days a week for 10 years. He's 45 years old, absolute beast of a human being. And he just shows up, does class, goes to work every day.
Yep.
And he's done it for 10 years, and he's phenomenally human being, capable, very capable, healthy, fit human being. And there's quite a few examples of people like that in the gym. And no, I always tell folks, it's not that you don't have time, you don't have priorities.
Yes. Because we all have the
Pull
same. We all have the same
24
time.
hours in a day.
There's people who are so much busier than me, you, and everyone listening, and they still get it in.
Dude, when I did 75 hard back in 2019,
Hmm.
I ended up going 110 days. Are you familiar with that challenge?
Oh yeah,
Andy
I've done
Frisella.
it
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest cleanse of bullshit out of your life that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I still had the people in the background, saying, oh, you own a gym, so that's what makes it easy. So I always give a 15-20%. I have an advantage when it comes to fitness because I own a gym. But then I tell people, like, you don't have to deal with all the other stuff that goes into owning a gym. So it's like, spend a week with me, and we'll see where it balances out. I have 2 kids. They're involved in sports. I spouse balancing all kinds of there's a handful of days that I just don't get to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to you prioritize your health or you don't. And I think in society it's become so easy to not be fit because when everybody around you is unfit, like, it's comfortable. I mean, I think fit shaming is a real thing.
Yeah.
People looking at fit people, judging fit people, it's a real thing.
Yeah. Why don't you live a little?
Yeah,
Why you
exactly. I've
gotta
heard
take it
that
so
comment
serious? Why,
so many times.
dude? Those people have fucking insecurity issues that they need to work out.
Oh yeah,
It's like, dude,
yeah,
look at you and your gut. Because I've had people say it, and they're again from the first 5 minutes. I don't care what your opinion is, and I'll just give it right back to a brother-in-law and uncle. It's like, well, I could look like you, and then that would
yeah,
suck.
yeah. And now I tell people, like, statistically, my fitness is going to allow me to be badass when I'm 80. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
have the body and performance levels of better than most 40-year-olds when I'm 80. The rate society is declining in their wellness
And cognitive function.
and cognitive function. So it's just like, these are the choices I'm making. Yeah, sure, I'll have a beer. I'll have a drink with a friend, but you're not going to see me throwing benders. You're not going to see
Yeah.
me skipping the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, like, it just, my priorities have shifted in such a dramatic fact that is, I mean, my wife and I have taken it so far that we're expanding our operation um, in many ways to work on the longevity stuff, to help people navigate, you know, the health equation, both medically and physically going forward. I mean, me and her both read that book, Outlived by Peter T., and it grabbed onto
Yeah.
both of us in a big way. And it was just super cool seeing a medical doctor come out and take that stance that aggressively, and then to see his popularity just rise. And looking at, I mean, I still deal with it, but people don't understand the compounding, like you said, of both positive and negative. So it's easy to go and have the cheat meal, have the drinks. It's not going to affect you so much right then, any more than that one workout is going to change your fitness right then. I think the biggest problem between the two is it's super easy to go have the drink and the cheat meal and not care really much about effort into what goes into your mouth. It's really hard to train. And because our society is not apt to doing hard things, difficult things, uh, it's really hard to subject yourself to physical exercise when the reward is so small, and to understand the compounding benefits is a decade, 2 decades, three
Mm-hmm.
decades. Like, to sit here and think that the workouts I did the last 2 days, I'm looking at the benefits of those 30 years from now, that's a really hard thing to wrap. And that's when you have to fall in love with the process.
Yeah. So I was going to say, when you fall in love with the process and make it a habit, that is actually easier. And it's hard for that generic, regular ass person. It's hard to get up in the morning and feel like shit, come home from work and not even want to play with your kids because you don't have the energy. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
the energy to sleep with your wife.
Yep.
Like, that to me is hard because we have 30 and 40-year-olds who are living that right
Oh yeah.
now.
Right now.
But and they can look at their grandparents or look at any elderly person, 70s, 80s, even 65, who are not living a life that looks very much fun. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you go online and you find the one guy who's 80 who's still fucking running marathons and squatting,
Yep.
and you're like, but that's the exception. No, 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 no. He's the exception from a societal standpoint. He's not the exception of what the physiologically humans can do. It's
Yep.
not the exception.
Yep.
That should be the norm.
Yep.
And at one point in time, that was a norm. And then you got people who are like, well, we didn't live past fucking 50. It's like, well, that's because of wars.
Wars
It's only
and
because of,
plagues.
yeah, wars and disease, which comes with that number. Otherwise, there was a period of time where people had to be fit in their 70s. And if they made it 80, they had to be fit. And
My
they
cousin,
were.
who works in spine surgery in Colorado, he had his patient, and she was like a 78-year-old woman, and her back was messed up, but she worked on a farm to this
Mhm.
day. Like right now, currently, I'm sure she's out working on her farm. Just very physically demanding work. And then he had a patient who was in his early 40s, desk job, very soft man, if you will. And he was describing it as, so if you looked at the two MRIs side by side, you would think one person, there's like pretty much a non issue. And then the one person's back, they should be in a wheelchair, just from a picture standpoint. The person that should be in the wheelchair was the lady, the 78-year-old, that's still physically active every single day. The other one was like basically, I'm in debilitating back pain. But my cousin's like, that 78-year-old woman, her muscular development was so much healthier than the younger man's that was a huge reason why he probably experienced so much more pain than she did.
Mhm.
And our society, like, there's a lot of jobs out there that you don't have a physically demanding life. Like, the most physically demanding thing you do in the day is carry the groceries maybe into the house.
Mhm.
So our bodies are meant to move. They're meant to be put under strain. They're meant to be put under load. And for health of the human body, it has to happen or it's just going to die. If it's not used, it's going to die. That was like, just listen to his story. And when it comes to the spine world, the difference between both their outcomes was insanely different. Like, she was back on the farm a week later. The other
Yeah, I'm
person
sure.
was not. Like, and it just using your body, exercise, general movement, training, it is absolutely vital to the human organism to
Mhm.
survive.
And when you mentioned the book by Peter Attia, Outlive, for those of you listening, Peter Attia, all their studies are human studies. They're
Mm-hmm.
not a mouse study that you'll read on the internet. Oh, it says if we do this for however long, this is going to be good for us. Yeah, that was a mouse study. All Peter Attia stuff, the only thing he publishes are human studies, just so we're
Yeah,
clear.
yeah, no, I mean, they dove through the weeds on epidemiological data from centuries, and it became so profoundly obvious that those who had higher muscle and a higher VO2 max lived a longer, healthier health span. Obviously, you got to rule out the people that get in a car wreck and stuff like that, but
Mhm.
those who lived longer were the fittest, highest VO2 max. They had the less incidence of metabolic disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart disease. He calls them the four horsemen.
Mhm.
And the incidence of those, and he also mentions there's a deal where the the smoker who trains hard, tends to have an equal or longer health span than the non-exerciser who doesn't smoke. Like, listening to him say that, I'm just like the power in that in fitness. And I will, be in the fitness nutrition industry. It's like you hear a lot, nutrition matters, and it does. It's huge. But after digesting a lot of that book, and we talks about, so fitness matters more. And in my mind now, nutrition comes into play to giving my body the optimal fuel so I can recover and train more.
Yes, I agree.
And then my whole nutrition world has gone into a whole nother level when it comes to like, because my daughter has Crohn's, and understanding autoimmune disease and the influence in metabolic function when it comes to carbon atoms, getting whole, unprocessed bullshit food that's in society, like getting clean, good food. It helps the body function better, which in my mind allows me to train better and train harder and recover better. And
Yeah, I
in
feel like
that,
that's
I
something
get
we can
fitter.
go deep into. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like he talks about if your fitness is up here, you're rated, everybody has a rate of decline, right? So you have your chart.
Mm-hmm.
Your fitness is up here and you have a rate of decline starting maybe around age 40, age 50. You're going to end up when you're 85 being a 60-year-old. But if your fitness is that way down here at 85, you're not going to be capable of doing shit.
Yeah.
And holding on and muscle mass, stability, bone density, and then your metabolic function. Muscle is the most metabolically demanding thing in your body for maintaining. I mean, women, I have a slow metabolism. No, you have no muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Muscle is metabolism. You don't train it. You don't use it. Of course, your metabolism is going to suck. The most metabolically demanding thing in your body is your muscle. And if you don't train it, use it, in my case, abuse it at times, yeah,
And that
you're going to
same
have
that same
metabolism.
lady's probably telling you she has restless leg syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like,
It's,
do you know what that is? Do you know what that actually means?
yeah. No, it's a fascinating world. And my wife gets it being internal medicine. The people that don't understand the potency and the importance of exercise and just want a pill and just, but it's become socially acceptable to live on pharmaceuticals and be incapable and let your body degrade over time. And drugs keep you alive, they keep you breathing, but there's no health span, there's no quality of life there. So I want to have quality of
That is
life.
true. Me too. Dude, I want fucking long quality of life, not
Yep.
quantity. Well,
Mhm.
Derek, I think that is the stamp.
Yeah, that's a better ending point than the old COVID.